Welcome to the next video by Photo Videographer. This time around it's not a tutorial on the Sony a7 III but a comparison of the technical specifications of 5 hybrid cameras to figure out which one is the best. Now, what's the reason for this video? If you are in the market for a new camera, the likelihood is relatively high that you are looking for a hybrid camera. Even if you have only done photography before, you probably want to at least give filmmaking a shot or want to have those video features just in case you need them. And let's face it, there is a clear trend towards moving pictures. Hence, it doesn't make much sense to buy a pure still image camera nowadays. Only 6 months ago, the choice was not that great. There was the Panasonic GH-5 and the Sony a7 III, which made the choice relatively easy. However, prior to this year's Photokina, 3 new hybrid cameras were introduced to the community, namely the Nikon Z6, the Canon EOS R, the Fujifilm X-T3. This makes the choice more difficult, especially if you are relatively new to photography and filmmaking, or because you don't own several lenses of a certain camera manufacturer yet or camera mount, and therefore are not bound to a certain system. And what's hampering the choice even more is the fact that Panasonic has announced a new full-frame hybrid camera with the S1, which they intend to launch in the first quarter of 2019. To cut a long story short, this video is meant to help you finding the right camera for your needs and preferences. Not surprisingly, since I have already mentioned them, the cameras that I'm going to review with you guys are the Panasonic GH-5, the Sony a7 III, the Nikon Z6, the Canon EOS R, and the Fujifilm X-T3. Now you might be wondering why not the Panasonic GH-5S, which is newer than the GH-5, or the Nikon Z7. With its low-resolution sensor of only 10.3 megapixels and its extensive video features, the GH-5S is a video-centric camera with which Panasonic targets filmmakers, not photographers. Comparing the GH-5S to the mentioned hybrid cameras wouldn't be fair to the GH-5S as it wouldn't score well in the still image section. On the other side, it wouldn't be fair to the other cameras when it comes to the video specs. And with close to 46 megapixels resolution, the Nikon Z7 clearly targets photography enthusiasts and professionals. It's not a hybrid camera in the narrow sense, but a still image camera that happens to have similar video features as the Z6. Those guys who already know me know that I appreciate what Sony has done to the mirrorless segment. Actually, they have created it, and that I'm a fan of the Sony a7 III, for which I have done several tutorials and will do more of them. Consequently, the suspicion is close that I'm biased. But I can assure you that I am a very results-driven guy. I don't care about brands, but about a camera's versatility, ease of use, and above all, about the quality of stills and videos I get out of it. Nevertheless, subconsciously, one might be biased and not realizing it. This is the reason why I compare the mentioned cameras based on their technical specifications. It's the most objective way of doing this. However, only because it's an objective way of doing this does not necessarily mean that it's the right way of doing it. Because finally it comes down to the look and feel of the stills and videos which were shot with the camera. Right, but assessing the look and feel of stills and videos depends on someone's preferences and therefore is pretty subjective. Some might prefer softer stills and videos with a more warmish tone, others sharper ones with a colder tone. Consequently, comparing the mentioned cameras based on their technical specs is a good starting point to provide you with a sound overview and help you assessing a camera's versatility, ease of use, and quality. Nevertheless, since it finally comes down to the look and feel of a camera's still images and videos, we won't quite get along with only looking at the technical specs. This is the reason why I have to include real-life experience. Since a single source of real-life experience can in fact be biased, I have gathered multiple sources of real-life experience to elucidate where they overlap or agree. For gathering all this information on the technical specs and real-life experience, I use a lot of sources. The camera manufacturers' websites, review sites, YouTube videos, and more. I did that prior to this year's Photokina to get the features and values that I had gathered confirmed at a booth of the manufacturers at a show. However, the guys there knew surprisingly little about their own cameras and wouldn't confirm them right away. Sometimes they were successful in looking it up, sometimes not. So I had to search further and in a few cases rely on information that I found elsewhere but couldn't be verified by other sources. Gathering all this information cost me an awful lot of time because I did it very thoroughly and faithfully. Nevertheless, I can guarantee that each single piece of information is correct. If you should spot that, please write it down in the comment section and provide a link to that information. Finally, before we get to the review itself, the way I do this comparison is as follows. Thematically, there are different sections we will be looking at. Each one of them comprises several features related to that theme. All features will be weighed equally. A camera will only score if it's better than the other camera in that feature, and double counting will be avoided. Only in those cases where the real-life experience differs significantly from what one would expect based on the respective technical specification, I will deviate from this path and grant the point based on real-life experience. But in those cases, I will provide you with a link to a video proving that this method is justified. Let's look at the camera sensors first, where we have the whole range regarding their format. Micro Four Thirds, which is the smallest, APS-C, which is somewhere in the middle, and full frame, which is the largest. Furthermore, we have different sensor types. The newer back-illuminated CMOS sensors, BSI is the acronym for backside illumination, and the older models. Surprisingly, as confirmed by the company itself, Canon is using the older Canon 5D Mark IV sensor in the EOS R, which comes with issues such as the 4K crop factor, lower dynamic range, inferior low light performance, and more of a rolling shutter issue. When it comes to the sensor design, Sony, and since the Z6 sensor is made by Sony, also Nikon use a dual gain architecture by which they can boost the dynamic range at higher ISOs. I couldn't get the last feature confirmed for the GH-5, the EOS R and the X-T3, but I won't evaluate the cameras by their sensor design nor format, size or type. What I will evaluate though is the result that is determined by the sensor's physical features, namely the resolution, dynamic range, low light performance and cropping. Since high resolutions are important to photographers and the Canon EOS R has the highest resolution of all cameras listed here, the first point goes to the EOS R. When it comes to dynamic range, we have to distinguish between the camera's manufacturer's official statements, which are usually on the more generous side, and the values which have been measured by third parties. While the Z6 seems to have the highest dynamic range with an alleged value of 15 EV, this is just stated by Nikon itself but has not yet been confirmed by third parties. And while Sony's official statement for the A7 III is 15 EV as well, only 14.7 EV was measured by DP Review, which is still very high. Since the Z6 sensor is manufactured by Sony and the A7 III and Z6 share the same sensor format, type, design and resolution, it's fair to assume that the Z6 dynamic range will turn out to be very similar to the 14.7 EV of the A7 III when measured by third party. Hence, both cameras score on dynamic range. The maximum ISO value of a camera is usually a good proxy for a camera's low light performance, where the A7 III and the Z6 score highest. And in fact, this is confirmed by real life experience. Thus, these points go to Sony and Nikon. Surprisingly, despite its smaller sensor, the X-T3's low light performance is at least on par with the EOS R, if not better, which is probably due to its more modern design. Whereas dynamic range and low light performance are affected by several physical features of a sensor, the cropping only depends on the sensor size. And here, the full frame cameras score because there is no cropping associated with them. Just as a side remark, focal length and crop factor are relative terms, and if one talks about crop factors, this is measured relative to a full frame sensor. If there were only small micro Four Thirds sensors, nobody would talk about crop factors. However, the sensor size has optical implications. The smaller the sensor, the narrower is the field of view of a lens, which makes it increasingly difficult to build wide-angle lenses without increasing the distortion and other adverse effects. For example, a 24mm wide-angle lens on a full-frame camera would translate into a 48mm focal length on a Micro Four Thirds camera with a crop factor of 2, which cannot be called wide-angle anymore. In order to still arrive at that wide-angle field of view on a Micro Four Thirds camera that equals the one on the full-frame camera, one would need a 12mm lens in this example, which is a more extreme wide-angle lens and which is associated with more distortion and other adverse effects, which negatively affect the lens's quality. Okay, let's leave it at that. The points go to the three full-frame cameras A7 III, C6 and EOS R, as there is no cropping associated with them. While not a feature of the sensor itself, with IBIS, which is the acronym for In-Body Image Stabilization, the sensors move to compensate for vibration, shake and shocks. Manufacturers like Canon make lenses with their own built-in image stabilization, and the best of them might be on par with IBIS. However, in most cases you don't get a 5-stop stabilization, but less. Furthermore, what if you want to mount older lenses without built-in image stabilization to your camera? You have to get along without any stabilization. On the other side, non-stabilized lenses can benefit from stabilization if you mount them to a camera with IBIS or in-body image stabilization. Consequently, the three cameras with IBIS, the GH-5, A7 III and C6 score here. Furthermore, the GH-5 stabilization is known to be very good, definitely a touch better than the one of the A7 III and C6, which is why the GH-5 gets a full point and the A7 III and C6 only half a point. To summarize this section, the clear winners regarding sensor-related features are the Sony A7 III and the Nikon Z6. Let's get to the next section, where we're gonna look at the camera's EVF, i.e. electronic viewfinder, and their displays or monitors. All 5 cameras have an OLED EVF, however, with differing resolutions. While the A7 III has the lowest resolution EVF, what you notice immediately when looking at it, some of the other higher resolution EVFs don't achieve refresh frequencies of more than 60 Hz. But since resolution is more important, all cameras but the A7 III score here. Since the EVF coverage and magnification is pretty much the same for all 5 cameras, no points are awarded here. And since all cameras have an LCD display with a very similar size, no points will be granted here either. However, while all 5 cameras have a touchscreen, the function of the A7 III's and X-T3's touchscreen is somewhat limited. For example, the A7 III has just 2 functions, namely touch to focus and to navigate with an assumed in still image. While I personally don't miss navigating the menu by touchscreen because I believe I'm faster using the joystick or control wheel, most people wouldn't agree and want this additional function of a touchscreen. This is why all cameras but the A7 III and X-T3 score here. While the lower resolution of the A7 III's EVF immediately catches your eye, I couldn't really see a difference in the quality of the camera's displays despite differing resolutions. However, this might depend on the environment at which you look at the display, and I have to admit that I couldn't do a direct side-by-side test looking at the same image in the same environment for all cameras. Hence, I have to give the C6 and EOS R the benefit of a doubt due to their higher resolution display, which is why they get the points. When it comes to the slewability or degree of mobility, a display that can be fully articulated is a big plus, especially if you are a vlogger. And while the X-T3 has a display what they call 3D tilting, it's still not fully articulated, which is why only the GH-5 and EOS R score here. Summarizing the EVF display section, the winner is the Canon EOS R. Let's switch to the autofocus section now, where it starts to get complicated. I couldn't get all values confirmed by the manufacturers, but it might not even matter. While contrast detection AF is for ultimate precision and accuracy, phase detection AF is for speed. Assuming that each camera is able to accurately focus on a subject after locking onto it, and since I couldn't get the number of contrast detect points confirmed for all cameras, I focused on the number of phase detect AF points, or in short, just PDAF points, because they are responsible for speed anyway. Judging from the sheer number of PDAF points, the EOS R should be the one with the fastest autofocus, but this is not confirmed by real-life experience. Furthermore, AF performance can differ significantly in still and video mode, which is why we have to distinguish between AF performance in still and AF performance in video mode. Here we have to rely on real-life experience, but different people get to different conclusions. Where virtually all reviews agree is the fact that the GH5's AF in still mode is rather slow, and given that it only offers contrast detect AF or CDEF, this sounds plausible. The rest of the pack shows pretty similar high AF performance in still mode, with the A7 III probably on the higher side. This seems plausible as well as the A7 III has inherited the A9's AF, which is currently the fastest on the market. However, the difference in AF speed in still mode is not big enough to only score the A7 III for this feature, hence all but the GH5 score here. Except for the GH5, all cameras are tracking well in video mode. If a subject goes out of frame, the X-T3 locks on first to the background and locks on first to the subject when it returns, followed by the EOS R, the Z6 and then the A7 III in this order. While the X-T3 and EOS R are faster, the Z6 and A7 III transition more softly. Across all tests, the A7 III appears to be on the somewhat slower end, but still significantly faster than the GH5. Just looking at AF speed, the Z6, EOS R and X-T3 would deserve a point, but there is more than just speed to AF performance. While all cameras let you determine AF responsiveness and speed globally, the EOS R only allows this for certain AF area. As such, AF speed for the EOS R can differ significantly depending on the situation and settings. Is this sufficient for not scoring the EOS R for this feature? Probably not. However, there's another caveat. At 120 frames per second, the AF of the EOS R turns off, which means your subject is not being tracked at all. This is why only the Z6 and the X-T3 get the point for this feature. All 5 cameras offer face detection, and for all cameras, AF via face detection works pretty reliably in still mode. In video mode, however, the GH5's face detection is slow, and the one of the EOS R does not work reliably. The EOS R frequently loses its subject when the subject turns the head, but does not necessarily lock back on the subject's face when it turns back. However, not granting any point would only be justified if the GH5 and EOS R completely lacked this feature. Since this is not the case, they get half a point each, whereas the other cameras get a full point. In contrast to face detection, not all cameras offer IAF, and for the ones offering IAF, performance can differ significantly. Only the X-T3 offers IAF even in video mode. The A7 III's IAF is the fastest and most reliable one in still mode, and with a future firmware update, Sony will even add animal IAF, which is not scored here. The EOS R's IAF is totally unreliable, and the GH5 and Z6 don't even have one. At least I couldn't find it anywhere. Consequently, the X-T3 and the A7 III get a full point each, the EOS R half a point, and the GH5 and Z6 no point. Obviously, the higher the coverage of the frame by AF points, the better it is. Unfortunately, neither could I find a value for horizontal and vertical coverage for the GH5, nor could I find a value for the vertical coverage for the X-T3. Hence, one could opt not to score this feature, but this is one of the differentiating features of mirrorless cameras versus DSLRs, which is why it is important to score it. The AF point coverage for the mirrorless cameras is on average significantly higher as for DSLRs. With the mirrorless cameras we are reviewing here, it's probably fair to assume that the GH5 has the lowest coverage because it is the oldest camera and extensive AF point coverage has only been introduced with the A9 by Sony. Furthermore, while the GH5's frame is only covered with CDEF points, the other cameras' frames are covered with CDEF and PDEF points. And while the values for vertical and horizontal coverage may differ for the remaining 4 cameras, the surface area covered should be pretty similar, which is why all but the GH5 get a point here. How much light does the autofocus need to work properly? For the EOS R, the AF is rated down to -6 EV. This sounds great, but while the values for the other cameras are based on f2 lenses, the EOS R's -6 EV is based on an f1.2 lens. This would translate into -4 to -5 EV in an apples-to-apples comparison. But this still remains the best value for this feature, which is the reason why only the EOS R scores here. Summarizing the autofocus section, we have one winner, the Fujifilm X-T3. Let's get to the next section with the still image specs. With the exception of the GH-5, all cameras offer 14-bit RAWs, which offers more possibilities and flexibility for RAW editing. Thus, all cameras but the GH-5 get a point. The horizontal and vertical resolution for still images in the 16:9 and 3:2 format is just shown for the sake of completeness. We have already scored for resolution in the sensor section, where the EOS R was the winner due to the highest resolution. Granting any points here as well would be double counting. Image quality is not an easily accessible feature as it is partly subjective. Furthermore, out-of-camera JPEG quality and RAW quality can differ. And for RAWs, it also depends what RAW editing program you use and how that RAW editing program interprets the RAW data. Thus, the best way is to compare the out-of-camera JPEG quality for different subjects and situations. Here, the 3 full-frame cameras show very high quality, and the X-T3 with its smaller APS-C sensor is also surprisingly good, which is probably due to its BSI CMOS sensor and it being the first APS-C sensor camera with internal 14-bit signal processing. The GH-5 falls short, but it's still okay. Consequently, all cameras deserve a full point for image quality under normal light conditions, with the exception of the GH-5, which gets half a point. When it comes to image quality in low light, the A7 III stands out. Surprisingly, the Z6 cannot quite match the A7 III's quality under low light conditions, despite being built around a very similar or maybe even identical Sony sensor. And despite its full-frame sensor, the EOS R falls short because Canon is using the old 5D Mark IV sensor, where not even a new image processor can compensate for its deficiencies. The X-T3 is closer to the A7 III and Z6 than it is to the EOS R, which means it is better than the EOS R. While built around a smaller APS-C sensor, the newer BSI CMOS sensor type seems to make up for this. The GH-5's low light performance is the worst, which is not too surprising as it carries the oldest and smallest sensor. Since the A7 III and Z6 score best, a full point goes to each of them and half a point each to the EOS R and the X-T3 and 0 to the GH-5. When it comes to burst mode, the highest frame rates that are stated by the manufacturers look nice, but are almost always associated with limitations like no AFAE tracking, no live view support and blackouts, cropping or lower color depth. The X-T3 offers the highest rate of 20 frames per second without these limitations with electronic shutter and 11 frames per second with mechanical shutter, which should be used when you want to reduce rolling shutter issues. With these high frame rates, the X-T3 is the clear winner, which is the reason why only the X-T3 gets the point here. Summarizing the still image section, we again have one winner, and again it's the X-T3. Let's switch gears now and get to the video specs section. Here it's gonna get tough. On the one side, there are specs that speak for themselves. On the other side, real-life experience can differ from what you would expect based on the pure specs. Regarding the highest frame rate and the maximum video resolution, the GH-5 and X-T3 stand out as they can record 4K at up to 60p, where P stands for progressive, which basically means that in contrast to interlaced mode, 60 full frames per second are recorded. While the X-T3 does so for UHD 4K and the somewhat higher resolution DCI 4K, the GH-5 did only UHD 4K in its original factory setting, but Panasonic later on added DCI 4K with a firmware update later on. Quite obviously, the points go to the GH-5 and the X-T3. The next 4 features are tough ones. Firstly, because we already have granted points for the highest frame rates and the maximum resolution for the GH-5 and X-T3. Awarding points for the same again here, whether it's internal or external recording, would be double counting. On the other side, recording in 10-bit with 422 chroma subsampling gives you more flexibility in color grading, but doesn't necessarily increase the quality for videos that are not graded in post. Also, higher bit rates seem to be advantageous, but a camera with a larger sensor should capture cleaner midtone information than one with a smaller sensor, but might have fewer values to record the subtlety due to a lower bitrate, which means higher compression. This means a smaller sensor camera like the GH-5 might capture a slightly less clean signal than, for example, the A7 III, but will preserve more information with its greater bitrate. both affects video quality, which is why we will be looking into this when it comes to video quality. This takes us to the Full HD or 1080p feature, where we only score performance, not video quality. Again, we will be looking into this in a couple of minutes. The A7 III is the only camera that lets you record Full HD video with up to 120p without cropping or reduced resolution. While the GH-5 has no additional cropping up to 180p due to its small micro four thirds sensor, all videos, no matter what resolution, frame rate, are heavily cropped in the first place. It's similar to the X-T3 but with less cropping compared to the GH-5. Thus, only the A7 III scores here. When it comes to the container in which videos are recorded, it doesn't make any difference whether it's MOV or MPEG-4 in my view, which is why granting any points here doesn't make sense. However, codec and compression make a difference. While H.264 is more widespread, the H.265 codec is superior, as you get the same quality with a lower file size or better quality at the same file size. This is why the GH-5 and the X-T3 score here, because it's good to have this additional option, especially as H.265 will become more widespread in the future. While all cameras offer their own flat profile, only the GH-5, the A7 III and the X-T3 offer hybrid log gamma, which is a high dynamic range, or in short HDR profile. This is very useful as it, similar to flat profiles, lets you capture much more of the camera's sensor dynamic range in the video, but doesn't have to be graded in post. This does not only accelerate your workflow, but yield pretty good results in terms of video quality. Thus, the GH-5, the A7 III and the X-T3 deserve getting a point for offering this option. On-screen assessment of videos that are being recorded applying a flat or HDR profile is difficult, which is the reason why Panasonic and Sony have equipped their cameras with display assist features. These let you assess those videos on screen as if they were already graded. And Panasonic even takes this a step further and lets you upload LUTs, i.e. lookup tables, to the camera. This is a really professional filmmaking feature, which is the reason why the GH-5 gets a full point and the A7 III gets half a point for its gamma display assist. Finally, let's see whether those cameras with 10-bit recording, 4:2 chroma subsampling and higher bit rates can capitalize on these professional features in terms of better video quality. Overall, one has to say that the differences in video quality are more obvious than in still image quality between the cameras. What I'm going to tell you about each camera's video quality is the summarized result across all video resolutions and frame rates that apply for the respective situation and feature. Let's look at the video quality under normal light conditions first. The GH-5's videos have a nice cinematic look and feel, but are not class-leading when it comes to details. The A7 III shows the most detailed and the cleanest video, i.e. with the least amount of artifacts, especially in 4K. This is probably to the oversampling from 6K to 4K, which provides 2.4 times the information needed for 4K. While color science has improved a lot, its videos have a somewhat digital look and feel, i.e. don't look as cine-like as the GH-5. A side-by-side comparison of the GH-5 and A7 III seems to confirm what I said before. While the GH-5 sensor captures a less clean signal than the A7 III, it preserves more information with its greater bitrate. Thus, the GH-5 is clearly able to capitalize on its higher bitrate, offsetting the deficiencies of the smaller sensor, but still doesn't quite match the cleaner videos of the A7 III. The Z6 also yields very detailed videos, but here the videos are significantly oversharpened, which introduces artifacts and results in a somewhat unnatural look. The EOS R should theoretically yield the best video quality due to its full-frame sensor and the highest bitrate in the group, but this is definitely not the case. The videos are very soft and show the least amount of detail. Furthermore, the EOS R crops in to 1.75 times at 4K, reduces resolution to 720p at 120 frames per second, and it has a big rolling shutter problem. On the positive side, though, the color science is good and Canon has still the best skin tones, but not by a high margin anymore as in the past. The X-T3 surprised me the most. The video quality under normal light conditions is as good, if not slightly better, as the one of the A7 III. Both cameras' videos are equally detailed, but the X-T3's out-of-camera videos look somewhat more appealing to me and other people. Colors seem to look more natural and show a slightly better highlight roll-off. Hence, the X-T3 seems to really capitalize on its 10-bit recording, 4:2 chroma subsampling, and its higher bitrate, which fully makes up for its smaller APS-C sensor. Summarizing what I said about the camera's video quality under normal light conditions, the A7 III and X-T3 clearly deserve their point. When it comes to low light performance, the A7 III is a clear winner. Its video quality is by far the best. Very detailed, very little noise, and no color shifts whatsoever up to ISO 12800. All other cameras' video quality starts to fall apart already at much lower ISOs. The noise with the GH5 increases relatively quickly and details suffer, but colors remain okay for somewhat longer than with the Z6 EOS R and X-T3. The Z6 is number 2 in terms of detail behind the A7 III, but by a relatively wide margin. However, colors look strange already from ISO 1600 onwards. Surprisingly, the difference in video quality of the EOS R under low light conditions relative to the other cameras is not as big as under normal light conditions. While still soft, the details are still acceptable between ISO 1600 and ISO 3200 with only slight color shifts. Above ISO 3200, it falls apart relatively quickly. The X-T3 cannot match its overall video performance under low light conditions. At ISO 1600, it's even softer than and shows less detail than the EOS R, which changes at higher ISOs. Overall, it's darker and shows slight color shifts. Hence, the A7 III deserves its point for low light performance. Next is video quality with flat profiles. As soon as you start to color grade the flat profile footage, the A7 III's video quality falls apart quickly at 4K and even quicker at Full HD due to its 8-bit recording. You get all kinds of bending and jittering. This is why hybrid log gamma makes a lot of sense for the A7 III. The Z6 is slightly better than the A7 III, which is probably due to its 10-bit 422 output when recorded externally. The biggest surprise here is the EOS R, where the external 10-bit recording 422 chroma subsampling and the highest bitrate in the field seems to do a good job in providing you with a lot of flexibility for color grading your footage. The results of these are nice colors, especially skin tones, and good highlight roll-off. Overall, while the sensor itself has not the highest dynamic range, the EOS R seems to be able to capture a lot of it in its flat profile footage, thanks to the features I have mentioned. Despite its 10-bit 422 internal and external recording at high bitrates, the GH5 cannot fully offset the deficiencies of its small sensor, but is still pretty good. Overall, the footage's look and feel is quite appealing. The X-T3 seems to be able to play out its video feature strength, as it yields the best video quality of all 5 cameras. While not built around a full-frame sensor, the new APS-C sensor design seems to make up for this so that the 10-bit 422 external recording at high bitrates can fully unfold its effect. It seems to fully preserve the somewhat lower dynamic range of the sensor in its flat profile footage. Very nice differentiated colors, very good highlight roll-off, cinematic look and feel. Consequently, the winner for this feature is the X-T3, which is why it gets the point. With that, the X-T3 is also the winner of the video specs section altogether. Next section on the list is connectivity, and here the first feature we are looking at is HDMI out for external recording. A micro HDMI connector is a nightmare because you will always be afraid of it slipping out while recording. While you can avoid this with a rig and an HDMI clamp, this means more weight you have to carry around. A full-size HDMI connector sits firmest in its socket, which is why this is the best option. And only the GH5 offers this, and therefore gets the point. However, mini HDMI is still better than micro HDMI, which is why the Z6 and EOS R get half a point each. All 5 cameras offer 3.5mm microphone jack, but none the more professional XLR connection, which is why none of them gets a point for this. And all 5 cameras offer a headphone jack. Since there is no differentiating factor between them, none of them gets a point here either. All cameras but the GH5 offer a USB 3.1 Type-C connection. The GH5 only offers USB 3.0. However, USB 3.1 Type-C does not necessarily mean you will have a data transfer rate of 10 gigabits per second. Officially, USB 3.0 doesn't exist anymore since the USB Implementers Forum has kind of assimilated the USB 3.0 specification into the USB 3.1 Generation 1 specification. Type-C is only the format of the connector. Whether you get a data transfer rate of 5 or 10 gigabits per second is determined by the generation. USB 3.1 Generation 1 offers 5 gigabits per second, USB 3.1 Generation 2 offers 10 gigabit per second. And since the camera manufacturers do not provide this information, I cannot evaluate the cameras for this feature. Thus, none of them gets a point here. What kind of Wi-Fi versions a camera supports is irrelevant as long as your Wi-Fi router supports them all. All modern routers do so, which is the reason why I don't grant any points here. And the same holds true for Bluetooth. You won't gain any advantage having Bluetooth 4.2 instead of 4.1, which is the reason why I don't award any points in this case either. Of all 5 cameras, only the A7 III offers an NFC connection, which is quite convenient for fast on-the-fly upload of downsized images and videos to social media or just send pictures to friends and relatives. It's good to have this additional option, which is why the A7 III gets the point. When it comes to the maximum number of lenses you can mount to a camera, Sony is the clear leader with its E-mount. Firstly, there are a lot of third-party adapters for all kinds of lenses on the market, which makes switching from a non-Sony lens system like Canon or Nikon an easy decision. Secondly, Sony has taken the support for those lenses to the next level, as many of the autofocus features even work with non-native E-mount lenses, no matter whether those are full-frame lenses or APS-C lenses. With the Micro Four Thirds mount, or in short, just MFT mount, Panasonic and Olympus have created a standard which seems to have gathered the attention of several third-party lens manufacturers, which is the reason why you have a huge choice of lenses here as well. Hence, the A7 III and the GH-5 get a full point each. For the Z6 and EOS R, we so far only know their own proprietary adapters, and in the case of the EOS R, pretty innovative ones that let you mount older Nikon and Canon lenses to the Z6 and EOS R respectively. We don't know yet about their connectivity to other lenses from third-party manufacturers because this will in part depend on third-party adapters that don't exist yet. Since I can only evaluate and score what's currently on the market, I probably shouldn't score them here. However, due to the wider diameter and the shorter flange distance of the C and RF mount, they are predestinated for third-party adapter development. Hence, I'm sure that we soon will see several third-party adapters for the Nikon Z and Canon RF mount that will improve connectivity and the choice of lenses you can mount to the Z6 and EOS R, which is why I give them the benefit of a doubt and grant half a point for each of them. To summarize the connectivity section, the GH-5 and A7 III are the winners. The next to last section is one that comprises 2 features that are important to professional and enthusiast photographers and filmmakers. If you earn your money with photography or filmmaking, you just can't risk losing data due to corrupt memory cards. This is why storage redundancy is important. Only the GH-5, the A7 III, and the X-T3 offer 2 slots. While the A7 III lets you the choice between different types of memory sticks and SDXC cards with 1 slot supporting the faster UHS 2 standard, the X-T3 offers UHS 2 support for both slots, but only for SDXC cards. The Z6 and EOS R only offer 1 slot, and Nikon even forces you to buy expensive XQD cards. Having 2 slots is more important than the format of the memory card, which is the reason why I grant only 1 point for the GH-5, the A7 III, and the X-T3 each, but not 2 points each. And the higher bit rates of the very expensive SDXC, UHS-2 and XQD cards only make sense if you shoot multiple bursts in a row in still image mode like a sports photographer. You don't need them for recording videos, not even at the highest resolution and bit rates these cameras offer. I have explained why in one of my tutorials on the A7 III, for which I will provide the link below. All cameras do provide weather sealing. Canon and Nikon cameras typically come with good weather sealing, and the EOS R and Z6 confirm this. I can't see any shortcomings on the other 3 camera bodies. However, a few people suggest that the A7 III's weather sealing might not be as good as the ones of the EOS R and Z6. Personally, I couldn't experience any deficiency out in the field using it extensively over the last 6 months, even in pouring rain. However, to avoid you guys thinking I'm biased, all cameras except for the A7 III will get a full point, whereas the A7 III will only get half a point. Finally, what one shouldn't forget is the price. What value do you get for your money? What immediately catches your eye is the price of the GH-5 and the X-T3, which is the lowest in the group by a wide margin. Consequently, the GH-5 and the X-T3 get a full point each for the best price. Now it's gonna get exciting, as I will disclose the winner. And believe me, as I did this in preparation for this video, I was as excited as you. Let's first look at the scores section by section and then calculate the total score. Let me summarize this for you. In the sensor section, the A7 III and Z6 score highest. The winner on EVF and display is the EOS R. In the autofocus section, the X-T3 scores highest and is also the winner in the still images spec section as well as in the video spec section. In terms of connectivity, the GH-5 and the A7 III score highest, and the winners in the other section are the GH-5 and the X-T3. And finally, the winners on price are the GH-5 and the X-T3. Now I'm gonna disclose the overall winner based on the total score across all sections and features. And the winner is, if you're good in mental arithmetic, you have already calculated this. The winner is, I am as excited as you, the winner is the Sony A7 III. The Fujifilm X-T3 earns a very good second place, which is well deserved. The Nikon Z6 is third, the Canon EOS R fourth, and the GH-5 fifth. You now might ascribe this result to a certain bias, as you know that I'm a big Sony and A7 III fan. But rest assured, I'm purely results driven and don't care about brands. All that counts for me is the camera's versatility, ease of use, and above all the quality of stills and videos I get out of it. I did this comparison as unbiased and objective as it can get. For those parts where I couldn't solely rely on a technical specification and had to include real-life experience, I provide the links below in the comment section. Furthermore, I didn't weigh certain features higher than others, but equally, as I don't know what needs and preferences you have. I won't be sad if you don't agree. I have provided you with all relevant specs and information, which now makes it easy for you to weigh them according to your own needs and preferences. Nevertheless, the A7 III is the winner in this, as I believe, objective and unbiased comparison. And this might not be too surprising. Sony has literally created the mirrorless hybrid camera segment and could gain a lot of experience over time and across several generations of cameras. This is probably the reason why the A7 III is still the most versatile hybrid camera on the market, with a lot of strengths and only a few weaknesses, not scoring really badly in any of the sections or features we looked at apart from the EVF and display, where Sony quite obviously wanted to save costs and improve their margin. And while Sony has listened to its customers and therefore has done a lot of things right over the past 10 years, they should also listen to us when it comes to the display. It's really time for a fully articulated display. We all would love it, especially vloggers amongst us. While preparing this video, the biggest surprise to me was the Fujifilm X-T3. I had already known about several of its really interesting and professional features prior to preparing this video, but the more I got into it, the more I liked what I saw. And in fact, realizing that the X-T3 scores highest in 5 out of 8 sections, I thought the X-T3 would become the winner of this camera comparison. While overall it doesn't quite match with the A7 III, its video specs are clearly superior to the A7 III, and the X-T3 is definitely the best bang for your buck, by far. I'm not a big fan of its retro design, although I have to admit the black edition does look okay, and I do prefer full-frame sensors over an APS-C sensor. But if I was currently in the market for a new camera, for a new hybrid camera, not owning a certain lens system yet, I would definitely seriously consider buying the X-T3. If you like the retro look, don't care about the sensor size, and your focus lies on filmmaking rather than photography, this is your camera. On the other side, the fact that the Z6 and EOS R couldn't score that well might not be too surprising. For both Nikon and Canon, the Z6 and EOS R respectively is their first serious mirrorless camera they have developed. With Sony's first generation mirrorless cameras, there was also a lot of scope for improvement. Even worse, I believe both Nikon and Canon developed their mirrorless cameras under a lot of pressure, as Sony was about to overtake them, becoming the biggest camera manufacturer in the world. I think that explains the shortcomings we are seeing. Don't get me wrong, the Z6 and EOS R are pretty good cameras, but don't quite match the quality of their DSLRs we are used to. Finally, the GH-5 was by far the oldest camera in this comparison, and it has the smallest sensor. In light of this, it still held up very well against the newer contenders with bigger sensors, why it is understandable why so many people love this camera. Last but not least, prior to the photokina, Panasonic announced that they will go full frame with the S1 and S1R, the latter being the higher resolution model and comparable to the Nikon Z7 and Sony A7R III. The model that would have fit this hybrid camera comparison would be the S1, but we still know too little about it to include it in this review. But based on the little we know, where especially the video specs look very interesting and promising, and based on Panasonic's experience with the GH-5, GH-5S and their professional video cameras, we should expect this camera to become a serious contender to the A7 III and the other cameras we looked at in this comparison. According to Panasonic, they will launch the S1 and S1 III in the first quarter of next year. Hence, you might want to wait before you make a decision which camera you buy. However, I believe the chance for the S1 being even cheaper than the Fujifilm X-T3 is very low. Okay, time to wrap up. This video has already run much longer than I initially planned, and it has cost me much more time to prepare than any other video before. Thus, I'd be glad if this video helped you find the right camera for yourself. If this is the case, I would very much appreciate your thumbs up. If you just like it because you are interested in this stuff and I could provide you with the desired information, I would be equally happy getting your likes. And if none of the mentioned applies, but you just want to support the hardworking guy with your thumbs up, feel free to do so. And if you want to get even more of this information overkill on topics around photography, filmmaking and gear in the future, just click on that subscribe button. Hit it, push it, smash it, whatever. And don't forget to hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button. Not hitting it means you will miss out on my next video because YouTube will not send you a notification when my next video is online.